Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be your MC once again and session chair for today. Yesterday, just a brief recap, we kicked off the conference on a high note with the keyword being 62 cents. And today we will be running on the same momentum with discussions around transport and logistics. But first, housekeeping. Please remember to set your mobile devices to silent mode during all sessions. Please also make sure to keep your delegate badge with you at all times. You may be aware of the Opus Conference app. If you haven't downloaded it yet, please do so. You can easily scan the QR code on your delegate badge and simply enter your email address and you're good to go. On the app, you'll be able to access all delivered presentations, which will be made available for download after the conference. And as always, yesterday you partook during the discussions with questions. Please continue the momentum today by posing your questions on the Slider app. Those are the QR codes you can scan to put in your questions. You will notice we do have official photographers on site, so please refrain from taking any photographs. Moving on to our sponsors, we'd like to thank our platinum sponsor, Menard, who helped us deliver the conference for these 2 days. And another warm thank you again to our media partners, the Ferroalloys Producers Association, FAPA. They gave a presentation yesterday. The International Manganese Institute, the IMNI, the South African Iron and Steel Institute, SAICI, as well as the Steel and Engineering Industries Federation of Southern Africa. And that brings us to the end of housekeeping. Let's somewhere get into the first session. We all know that Transnet has welcomed the private rail operators on its main rail network. And in this session, we are looking to see just how much this will translate into the export ramp up on the chrome and manganese sectors. I will now call upon the stage Bonginkosi Mabaso. He is the Chief Commercial Officer at Transnet Group. Please give him a hand. Let me just read his bio. I know a few of you might be familiar with him, but it's also a protocol. Bonginkosi is an accomplished executive with a global executive experience in new business development, commercial, risk and strategy, and capacity creation in the freight, rail, finance, manufacturing, mining, and metal sectors. He is a strong implementer who collaborates, negotiates, and solves complex commercial business matters. Formerly Chief Commercial Officer for Transnet's rail division, Bonginkosi has recently taken up the role of Group General Manager in the commercial role for Transnet. In this role, he is responsible for developing and leading the execution of the group's commercial and capacity creating strategies. This entails maximizing profitability and growth through integrated business development. He is also responsible for defining and selecting appropriate business product opportunities. He is the custodian of customer relationships and provides market insights which guide business modeling, strategic alliances, partnerships, and long-term planning for new client acquisitions. Bonginkosi serves as the lead negotiator for the organization's revenue contracts. I will now call upon the stage Bonginkosi to give us his presentation. Over to you.
Thank you, Klenwe. As you were looking back, I was wondering whoever gave you that was being honest with you. We are talking big things there. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I must confess, when I was given this lot, I was so excited because it was the first lot of the day, and I assumed that you guys won't be here, you'll be late, and therefore that will make my life a lot easier. But you guys are super efficient. You woke up and you're here on time. I also was excited for a second reason. The reason is that these conversations from a Transnet perspective are becoming more and more easier over the years. I was saying to Fengo earlier backstage that we really, as an organization, are getting to the space where we are turning a corner, where we are seeing some fruits of the work that we've put in coming to fruition. There we go. So first of all, again, for those that have not really interacted with us, I thought I'd start off by just sharing with you who we are. As Transnet Group, we operate 7 divisions. Transnet Property, which has a portfolio of close to 30 billion rands in property, one of the biggest in the country. We operate Transnet Port Terminals, which runs all the terminals in the country from a shipping perspective. We run Transnet Freight Rail, which is obviously the most popular of our divisions that offers rail services. We have recently introduced a new division called Transnet Rail Infrastructure Manager, which has taken up the role of infrastructure owner over the network. They own about 30,000 track kilometers of rail, one of the biggest in the world and mostly the biggest in the continent. We also operate Transnet Engineering, which offers engineering services across the board, but mainly focused on rail and port. We run pipelines, which also runs one of the biggest pipelines in the world. It's something close to about 25,000 kilometers, one of the longest between Devon and Joburg, again multiple lines of the pipeline. We also lastly operate Transnet Port Authority, which is the landlord and the authority of port infrastructure. So in a nutshell, those are the divisions that are formulated to provide industry with a seamless logistics solutions, but ultimately our key mandate as Transnet is to assist in lowering the cost of business in South Africa and the SADC region. Ours is to ensure that we offer efficient and cost-effective logistics solution across the board. We are therefore, through that, are entrusted with enabling economic growth in the country and ensuring security of supply and enabling industry and investment ultimately into the country. I thought before I talk to you, and Fengo and Tim asked me to talk mainly around where we are now and what we're doing now, I thought we'd start off by just sharing a bit of taking down memory lane, where we come from as Transnet, a couple of strategies that we have had implemented in the past. Prior to the 2005s, the focus from a Transnet perspective was around offloading all non-core assets to make the organization lighter and therefore more agile, focusing mainly also on ensuring that we focus on the core business. That was executed successfully. We then moved on to a turnaround strategy. Now at this stage we're a lighter and more agile organization, and the focus of that was defining core business and rationalizing and enabling that growth from that which we regarded as core business. That was executed successfully. Come 2012 to 2018, our strategy shifted to more, we were stable at that point in terms of execution and productivity. We focused onto the future, and the future was we wanted to create demand ahead of, create capacity ahead of demand, hence the market demand strategy. The intention was ensure that the rail systems are in place, ensure that we've got adequate rolling stock, and the purpose of that was to catch all market booms and growths as they will present themselves into the future. That was also executed successfully. We then moved on to a stage where, due to market volatility, we looked at markets such as coal and we realized that with the conversations around green energy, that there might be sunset markets, and therefore we started looking at diversification, and that was Transnet 4.0. In that process of diversification, we started seeing a significant decline in performance while we were pursuing diversification, and therefore had to then sort of rebase ourselves. In doing so, then enters our strategy currently. And where we are focusing now is we are looking at a three-pronged strategy. The first part of it is we are looking to fix and optimize the business, and in doing so, the primary focus is let the first thing be the first thing. Let's run trains, let's run ports, let us focus on operational efficiencies. We've been sort of pursuing that, whilst at the same time also considering and ensuring that our transformative compliance is also in place. That would include compliance to policy as policy changes. Clem mentioned just now the issue of reform, rail reform. As government policy changes, we also then had to sort of restructure ourselves to ensure that we are compliant in that regard. And then lastly, our focus is then to ensure that as we optimize and fix the business and bring about stability and transform in terms of policy compliance, we also focus on growing as well. Ultimately, the mandate remains the same. The mandate of Transnet is to enable economic growth, and therefore we ran a three-pronged approach. The primary focus being the first two pillars, and the last pillar obviously coming in once there's stability to then take us forward. Our key focus areas, as I've indicated, have been over the past couple of months, and when I say months, a period of about 2 years. It's been operational execution. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we are measured for the number of trains that we've moved, the number of vessels that we've loaded at the port, and the amount of liquid fuels that we've moved via our pipeline systems. And therefore, first thing has always been, for the last 24 months, to ensure that we execute according to plan. The second important pillar has been to ensure that our equipment and infrastructure is ready and able to serve the markets. And therefore, the primary focus on that was improving availability and reliability of equipment. We've had a number of locomotives and improving our rolling stock on order being delivered to us as a business. We've ensured that through our transport engineering division, that there is focus on ensuring that we churn out this equipment that has been sitting awaiting maintenance through the division. Our third layer of focus has been on improving our systems and processes in-house. There's no point in wanting to focus on execution when things such as procurement remain an issue, where you have long lead items that are out of stock consistently, because then you are not going to have equipment reliability as something that you are able to deliver. So we've been focusing on people management, ensuring that we've got people that are upbeat and that are ready to serve. We've been ensuring that our procurement processes are streamlined, and we've engaged extensively with government to have some of our procurement policies relaxed so that we are able to then move with agility. A part of what will take away our agility has always been the governance around how we procure, to the extent that it renders it impossible for us to compete with private sector in areas where we compete for commodities. We focused also on having a clear and clearly defined maintenance regime. We've got a plan that we stick to in terms of our maintenance. Take, for example, last year on the O-line, it is one of our good stories. We've had the best shutdown that delivered most work than we've had in over 10 years that was delivered last year. And all of that comes from a renewed focus on clearly defined maintenance regimes that are executed and delivered on time. And then lastly, all of these things obviously require funding. The focus has been then to say, through the markets that we work with, we ensure that we are able to fund all these operational requirements that we have, but also capital requirements into the future. In the medium to long term, our focus has also been to recognize where we have gaps as an organization. And the gaps that are clearly in front of us are around our ability again to raise funding, capital funding, to be able to deliver some of the capital works that lie ahead of us. I think last year when I was standing here, I shared with this conference that one of our biggest challenges that we've had has been systemic underinvestment in infrastructure. And that's not something that we can turn around using our own balance sheet, because our performance has not given us a strong enough balance sheet to do that. And therefore, we rely heavily on private sector participation transactions, and we are bringing on board private sector capital to support best as possible. We are looking at digitalizing the business and bringing on board newer and more efficient systems that could carry us forward. And then lastly, safety remains a key priority for us as well. Having done all of these things, like I've said, when the current leadership of Transnet took over, we did not have a lot of time to register wins because the house was on fire. I remember when I stood here 2 years ago, the kind of questions that came up were not the kindest to us, and therefore there was no time for us to find ourselves. We really needed to register wins and to deliver volumes to industry. So as a result of that, having come from our best performing year ever in 2017-18, where we delivered 226 million tons, we fell up to 149 million tons by 2022-23. The biggest challenge has been registering or arresting the decline. I think I always find people celebrate the growth more than they celebrate the turning point. I think for me, the biggest challenge that we faced was shifting the mindset of our employees to say, we are no longer going to allow further decline of volumes, and we need to arrest that. And within 12 months of that, we saw results. 2022-23, our lowest ever performing year, we hit 149 million tons. 2023-24, we arrested the decline immediately, and we registered 151.7 million tons. Last year, 2024-25, we registered 160 million tons, and we started showing growth. This year, I can guarantee you we are going north of 160 million tons, significantly as well. And therefore, I think more than anything, we really have registered a good story. We acknowledge and respect the fact that we are not where industry wants us to be, and there's no shying away from that, and we can't run away from that. Your demands and industry demands remain much higher than where we are, but ultimately, at the end of the day, what was key was for us to ensure that there is no decline, rather that we see some significant improvements in performance. Now I'm going to zoom into the two commodities that bring all of you into the room here today. Manganese, we are registering some significant improvements in our performance. If you look at what we did in 2024-25, by January around this time, we had registered 12.9 million tons of executed export volumes. This year we are registering 13.9 million tons, a 8% increase just on the manganese sector alone, and that really is as part of the upward trajectory that we started taking into. That comes from mostly operational discipline. This number here has not been achieved through any capital investment whatsoever. It was through running what we already have as an organization. We have not built a new line, we have not bought new weapons, we have not brought in anything that is capital in nature. It was purely through operational discipline and a change in mindset from those that we operate with. The similar story rings true for Chrome as well. In Chrome, we are sitting at about a 15% improvement from last year. We are registering about a 600,000 ton improvement. Again, similarly, no capital works involved and no rolling stock that has been brought in. Purely operational discipline that has brought us to where we are. What does that mean? That means at the time when there is now capital injected in our infrastructure and in our rolling stock, it will become a more easier and more seamless conversation to have, because we still are troubled by things such as security incidents. We are losing about 500,000 tons of volumes through security incidents. We brought in the outcomes-based security contracting regime, which I shared again last year when we were introducing it. We are seeing results of that because the losses to security have reduced, but it's still not where we want it to be. Ultimately, there are two corridors that are touch points for Chrome, Ferrochrome, and one of those is the central corridor. And in the central corridor, we are lagging behind in rolling out the security regime that I've spoken about, and that's where most of our losses are. There's a lot of work that's going into ensuring that that is the case. Our second biggest loss is around the rail infrastructure and network itself. Again, there's a lot of work that's going into that. In the North Corridor, the coal line, for example, where we run Chrome as well, there is a signaling project that is currently being rolled out that is to improve signaling systems, and therefore that would also have some positive impact on the Chrome volumes that we'll be running. There are other losses, but the most significant are the two security issues and rail network issues. Even with those issues, we are still able to register some improvements. Again, I keep on reiterating this because it's important. All of this through operational discipline. Having said so, I'd like to double-click briefly on the manganese long-term planning. As you'll be aware, and I don't need to I'm preaching to the choir here when I say you are aware that South Africa sits with the highest reserves in the world of manganese, and our market share in terms of seaborne manganese is 36%, yet our ore reserves sit at about 73%. There are opportunities as countries that suffer from great degradation over time start reducing their throughput and run out of reserves. It presents an opportunity more and more for South Africa. If you look at 2050, for example, the forecasters are saying there will be a gap of about 15 million tons that can still be captured by South Africa in markets into the future. And therefore there is a need for South Africa to focus on ensuring that we deliver improvement in volumes. We have been doing so. We have been running after short-term capacity improvement initiatives. Again, these are initiatives that require no capital, no money invested, using what we have and optimizing on the basis of what we have. And that's where some of this growth is being registered. One of those is on the ore line to Saldanha. The ore line itself can carry up to 100 tons per wagon of ore. We have been loading manganese through the ore line at 63 tons because of the link between Sishen and Waterzelle. Those of you that are familiar with the Northern Cape. The manganese line starts in Waterzelle and it connects with the iron ore line in Sishen, and the iron ore line has got a heavier axle load density. We've been underloading manganese through that line. A small scale step that we took was to improve our ability to load wagons. Just with that alone, we are registering an upside of 1 million tons per annum in manganese. Now, just to put things into perspective, 1 million tons out of 16 million tons is a significant step forward. We've introduced another solution via East London for manganese. It's still new, it's still limping. We are still sort of refining it and improving efficiencies on the line, but it is registering some volumes for industry as well. We are struggling a bit in containing costs in that part of the world. Obviously, fixed costs on the line will remain to be recovered, and we are trying to find costing mechanisms that would make it viable for industry to use that line. We have been moving heavier trains and longer trains. Just a simple act in PE, we added just one wagon on our train, just one 62-ton wagon. Instead of 104 wagon trains, we now run 105 wagon trains, and that's registering some volumes. So all these small wins are enabling us a bit of growth and have enabled us to bring on board new players into the space and therefore ensuring an inclusive market. And all of that year on year has given us a 8% improvement in what we execute. But that's not what you want to hear. What you want to hear is, when are we having those scalable jumps into the future? The Port of Mocha, which has been a project that has been on the go for the longest of time, remains one that we are pursuing. We have not reneged from that commitment to industry to create a manganese hub. And therefore, we are still on track with that. This schematic view shows you what is on the cards. We are building a new stockyard, which will be about 3 kilometers from the shipping appliances. A belt which will run the 3 kilometers, linking up the stockyard in the Mocha area to the beds. And obviously, we are looking at bringing on board appliances that will help in loading vessels faster. Nothing has changed in terms of that. We are still on track for that project. The details around that is that the port of Capetown, which is where we currently export manganese through PE, has surpassed its useful life, and therefore we are under pressure to either reinvest in that port or move out of that port. And the decision was taken a couple of years ago, which is endorsed by government, to say that port must become a clean port because it is that close to the CBD and also residential properties, and therefore we are moving away from that into the Port of Mocha. The longer we wait to do that, is the more risk we present to the manganese industry, because that plant could fail at any moment. We've put in stopgap solutions and measures in place to sort of reduce the risk of that happening. However, there is pressure that a decision needs to be made ultimately for us to move. And the intention is therefore ultimately to move, and we are committing to move by 2030. That's the revised timeline for it. We are currently undergoing feasibility studies, and that should be concluded within the first quarter of the new financial year, which will be between April and June. The intention is to have that in place, and ultimately we are looking at a close in 2030 for the project to then proceed. The project entails two parts. The first part is a rail improvement. The rail system to the Port of Capetown again is as dated as the port system. It was a line that was built many years ago, and over time we've been nursing it and maintaining it. But through maintenance alone, you start having areas that become risky in terms of running operations, where we then have to put in place speed restrictions to ensure that there are not derailment incidents. And over time, it starts eroding capacity on the line, and therefore that entire system needs to be upgraded. But most importantly, we need to put in place new passing loops. More passing loops would enable then more frequent traffic onto the line. So there are certain sections of the line that will be upgraded completely, but there are certain sections that would require just passing loops that will enable that growth in volumes. From a port perspective, we are looking to put up a scalable port that will start off at 12 million tons with a capability to scale up to 16 million tons, and ultimately the remaining balance of throughput, we are targeting 24 million tons between 22 and 24, will be executed via the Port of Saldanha. The Port of Saldanha comes with its own benefits in that it's a system that, as I've indicated earlier, can carry heavier trains, and therefore we want to sweat that as much as possible as well into the multi-purpose terminal in Saldanha. That said, I mentioned earlier that part of our journey has been to focus on ensuring that there's regulatory compliance and that we are restructured to accommodate the change into the future in relation to the many reforms that are currently at play. And of course, the biggest of that is the rail reform, which we rolled out recently. Again, the purpose of the reform is to ensure that we have private sector capital that is being pulled into the investment that is required, number one. And number two, it is to address the rail addressable market. We, having conducted a study, we are aware that there is demand for rail addressable throughput in the country of about 240 million tons. At the best performing year, Transnet only did 220 million tons. Right now, our target is to do 180 million tons and ultimately migrate towards the 200 million ton mark, which means there is no world where Transnet on its own can capture all markets and satisfy 240 million tons of throughput for the entire country, which is why the reform makes sense to say bring on board private sector operators that will come in and plug the gap between what Transnet is capable of and what remains as demand from the different markets. What is key to note though is that a lot of players, when they consider reform, they look at it as though we are bringing in private sector to compete with Transnet. There is no competition in this instance because, as I've said, there is enough volumes to go by for Transnet and all operators that could come on board as well. And therefore, we're not looking at private sector operators as coming in to eat our lunch, but rather to supplement where we are unable to reach in terms of our performance. We've started a process. In the short term, we went out through our Transnet Rail Infrastructure Management. Maybe let me start there just so that I complete the picture. We took what was our rail division, Transnet Freight Rail, and it was divided into two. The one part being the owner of the infrastructure, Transnet Rail Infrastructure Management function. It will be a regulated, or it is a regulated entity. At this stage, it is regulated under the interim regulatory capacity, IREC. Ultimately, government will set up a fully fledged regulator to then carry out that work. Through that, TRIM now no longer fully reports or completely reports into Transnet. They do have the line that goes into the regulatory body as well. And with that, then the rail infrastructure owner would put together a network statement that invites parties that want to apply for capacity through the system. Transnet Freight Rail, as a train operating company as well, would undergo a similar process, and therefore we have also tendered for some of the slots on the line, and the slots that we are currently running would have come out of that. The second part of it would then have been the award, which was done as well. You will be aware that there were 11 train operating companies that were awarded slots to the system, and the slots were across various corridors, totaling about 24 million tons that the third-party operators could move on the line. Again, just to reiterate, this is 24 million tons of throughput that Transnet was not moving. which means then ultimately if Transnet moves, I'm taking last year's figure, 160 million tons, with third-party operators now the country is moving 184 million tons. If Transnet moves 180, the country is moving 200 million tons. The intention of reform has always been to ensure that there is a scalable growth of capacity of throughput that moves via our rail and port systems. There are 29 slots that have been granted to these operators, and ultimately where we are now is we are on the onboarding process, ensuring that they come on board and they start operating. One of the biggest limitations that the third-party train operating companies have had has been around availability of rolling stock. And in trying to solve that, we, as Transnet, having surplus rolling stock, have then worked towards putting in place a leasing company. The idea of the leasing company is twofold. Number one, it's to enter into tactical leases that support reforms in the country and enable movement by the third-party operators. And number two, it is to support a flow of throughput within the SADC region, and therefore supporting countries within the SADC region. And as a result of that, we have been in the market looking for a partner that can work with us in enabling that. Obviously, there is investment required because the rolling stock that we are referring to is rolling stock that Transnet could not maintain over time, and we've got plenty of that in terms of surplus. And we also are therefore pursuing, as I've said, leases as well within other rail operating companies outside of South Africa. We are talking to ZRL, NRZ across the board in the continent, and they've shown a keen interest in leasing some of our rolling stock. A market study indicates that there is a demand of over 17,000 wagons and 170 diesel locos just from the SADC region alone. And that tells you that we can't sit with surplus rolling stock that we don't have capital to fix when there is money from private sector that can come in to refurbish that rolling stock and put it into productivity, whether in the country or outside of the country, hence then the approach. Just a snapshot of some of the rail operators that we are talking to. In the DRC, there is an order of about 1,800 wagons and 56 locals that we are engaging on. In South Africa, as I've said, we are looking at a rail addressable market of 250 million tons versus 160 that we are doing. That requires rolling stock. Zambia, they've reached out to us. We are engaging on 3,600 wagons. Zimbabwe is the biggest because they have a very finite or limited rolling stock. They are looking at about 10,000 wagons and 54 locomotives. Our partners in Eswatini, which we've been supporting over the years, are looking at about 885 wagons. So there's a clear demand from the SADC region in terms of rolling stock. And again, to enable movement of cargo, free movement of cargo, it does require that as Transnet, with the surplus that we have, we come to the party in enabling that growth. Some of this volume will ultimately find its way either into South Africa or out of South Africa through our cross-border operations, and therefore we are well on track to deliver that. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to pause there and thank you for the opportunity. But in summary, the one story that we are telling as Transnet is difficult as it gets, our hands are on deck, and the intention is to ultimately reach the 180-200 mark in terms of the volumes that we are moving. Thank you anyway, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Bonginkosi, for that presentation. Certainly quite a comprehensive one. Gives an overview of the updates that are going on at Transnet. Just to remind you, I'm already seeing some questions on Slido. Thank you. Keep them coming, and I'll be sure to get to them as the conversation goes along. But Bonginkosi, it's so good for you to finally sit here after 3 years. We've been doing this for quite some time. The tone sounds different, quite positive. Let's talk about some of the wins for 2025. 12 million tons on manganese, 13% increase on chrome ratings. And I think one thing that stuck out that you mentioned, that you emphasized, that you managed to be resourceful and work with what you have, which is quite good. Talk to us about some of those, what backed up these improvements.
Thank you. At the crux of it, I'm going to say it's been our people. If you walk in the corridors in Transnet, you can feel that there's a change in tone and climate in the environment. People are more upbeat, people are more willing, and people are more present in terms of their hunger to deliver. And secondly, it's really been going back to the drawing boards, as I said earlier. What we found is that a lot of the initiatives that have brought about volumes have been through structured engagements, first of all internally, but also with our customers. We've had solutions that would come from industry. Industry would say, can you consider doing this and that? I'll take the East London solution for manganese. That was something that came from a customer that says, you've got a line, you've got a port, I've got cargo, what do you require? And we worked together in defining that, and it ended up with a fully fledged solution that runs manganese. And again, we are looking at each and every element of part of the value chain, and we're saying, how do we optimize that part? And through that optimization, loading the trains heavier. The Saldanha train, for example, we were loading 63 tons. We upped it to 68 tons. It's not a lot, but it moves the needle. It moves the needle over time. So it's through those initiatives that do not require Capetown that we've been able to move.
We've got rail reforms that are upcoming, but that will only sort of take shape in the coming years and longer term. When we talk 2026, 2027, your new financial year, what are some of the improvements that we can look forward to on the manganese and chrome lines?
On the manganese line, starting with that, our intention is to, now that we've proved the East London solution, is to bring in a bit more resource in terms of that additional rolling stock, and that would then enable that growth. What we are also doing is, as we receive more locals on the coal side, we are taking the old coal locals and plugging them into manganese, and that is enabling also further growth, and that is in the cards and in the pipeline for 2026. But most importantly, we are also looking at upgrading that section of the line from Waterzen to Sishen, such that we ultimately get to the 100-ton wagons. It's a medium-term project, but on the onset, it will be scalable to the extent that we continue to up the axle load. We run to Saldanha a 125 wagon train that loads 63 tons, as I said, which has now moved to 68. If we could move that to the 70s, 125 tons, that the math would tell you that there would be some significant improvement in terms of throughput. So all work continues in terms of using what we have, whilst obviously Trim, on the other hand, is working on improving the system. On the North Corridor, one of the biggest projects that we are running is the resignaling of the network. That will have a significant improvement on ferrochrome volumes that move via the port of Richards Bay. The plan for this year, 2026-27, would be to move from 20 trains, which is what we are currently executing for chrome, to 28 trains. There is a significant jump, and that is work that is in the pipeline, and we believe that will be achieved.
Just to dwell on manganese a little bit more, you touched on the port of Mukha. Is it Mukha? You touched on the port of...
yes, Kuha. Call it Kuha.
Kuha, let me call it Kuha.
I'm making your life easier.
Yeah, please. The port of Kuha, I personally like to go on site and visit these places that we work on a day-to-day basis, right? And I remember traveling to the port of PE, I think sometime last year, just to see what is it all about, how the facilities are looking there. And you are right, it's within the city. The trucks usually struggle to make their way into the port, given that it's an urban area as well. But talks of transferring that manganese terminal into have been going on for quite some time now, and I think you gave the timeline of 2030. What is the work that's being currently done to make sure that that port is operational by then?
Thank you. So, first of all, the primary reason that it has not happened over time is that we've been focusing on doing it ourselves. And obviously, as our balance sheet continued to lose strength at the back of reduced performance, it became evident that it's not something that we will deliver on our own. It's only at that stage that we then started engaging the idea of engaging private sector to come on board and to support with the required capital in order to do that. And that's where we are now. And we are at that stage where the collaboration comes on board. There have been RFPs that are out in the market around that, and we're exploring finding the right partner that will come and invest in infrastructure. We are looking at a joint operation once that is in place, and therefore ultimately a transfer back to Transnet over time. So the biggest change in gears here has been a change in approach where instead of doing it ourselves, we are bringing on board the required capital from the private sector to be able to do it.
2030 is 4 years from now. I assume we'll still be sitting here, and I'll ask you about it. Hopefully, there will be some color coming up from Kucha.
There will be some color coming out of Kucha. I must say though, what we've done in the interim, and this is very important, is whilst this work is currently underway, we've devised a system that enables us to use the port of Kucha even outside of the investment. Again, we partner with the private sector.
So it's still functional.
It is functional now, it's moving volumes now. What we did is we enabled back of port, privately operated back of port facilities, where trains would, instead of going to the PE terminal, would go to a back of port and be offloaded there. And the back of ports would then take the cargo into the port of Kucha. And for that reason, it doesn't require investment in appliances for shipping. It is we load vessels that have got ship's gear, and we are therefore able to move cargo. The challenge with that is that system has not been proven to be able to take the entire 5 million tons that go to the port of PE right now, and we've used it as a ramp-up mechanism over the years. That's how we've achieved a growth in manganese from 5 million tons to 16 million tons. It's been through these partnerships with the back of port facilities over the years. And now the question is, how do we leverage that to reduce now the reliance on PE even more into the future? So come the time when Kucha is on board, by then already you'll find that would have been moving significant volumes to the port of Kucha.
That sounds good. Let's touch back on rail. Efficiency hinges really on technology. And I like to talk about signaling. What are some of the upgrades that we can look forward to in terms of signaling?
Thank you, and I'm glad you asked. So on the rail side, on the manganese side, that the re-signaling project will be part of the bigger with private sector ramp up that I mentioned earlier. But on the chrome and ferrochrome side, we have undergone a study together with industry that looks at understanding what requirements are in place for rail improvements. And through that, the line condition assessment was concluded, and it gave an indication that we needed a certain section of the line completely re-signaled. In that section of the line, we were running manual authorization. Manual authorization means when a train comes and a person must now call the driver and say, park there, this one must move, that one. There are significant risks with that. We've had in the past some incidents that were as a result of human error. Obviously, in a large-scale operational environment like that, you can't rely on an individual that must make phone calls to authorize trains to move around. There's a big project to re-signal a section of the line on the pole side. It is currently underway and being rolled out. And again, it's something that we are not doing on our own. We are doing with industry, in partnership with industry. And as that rolls out, it will then effect some significant improvements. We realize that our systems are, compared to global standards, extremely dated and therefore require some significant improvements.
And I'm assuming the upgrades of these signalings will also help with the TOCs that are coming on board.
Absolutely. One of the things that we've always been saying as a business is that it doesn't help to bring many train operating companies to come into a network that still remains the same, because then they will come in and they will be hindered by the exact same challenges that Transnet has had over the years. So through them coming in, that has to sort of coincide with efforts to improve the line, and that's what TRIM is focusing on. Of course, there is ability to then raise cash at the back of the access fees that the train operating companies are going to be paying to TRIM, and that allows them for indirectly private sector through the TOCs to pay for the refurbishment of the infrastructure.
Let's touch on security. That's a very major concern, especially on the the chrome line at the Steelport area. You hear of many chrome theft incidents by the Steelport area where chrome ore is being stolen from wagons. What is Transnet currently doing to sort of combat that?
Thank you. So we have focused our efforts on managing our security differently. I think I reported on that last year when I was here, and we are seeing results of that. Instead of contracting with our security service providers on a standard contracting basis where we say we need you to bring 50 guards, 50 vehicles, they must be armed, they must do this and that. All we do now is we say to the service provider, here's the line, we want the incident to reduce from this number to that number. You only get paid on the basis of the success that you've achieved. And that allows them carte blanche and a blank check to, yes, we just say we want this achieved. They would then bring the requisite technology and the resources that they require. Where we have implemented that, we are seeing some significant success. And the area that you are referring to is one area where we are recently rolling that out, and we are hoping that we'll see the same type of improvement that we've seen in other areas as well. But there has been a significant success where it has been rolled out successfully.
That's good. Let's quickly touch on the rail reforms before we get into your questions on Slido. 11 companies have been selected to partake as TOCs on the main rail line. Where are we with the negotiation process, and do we still have all 11 participants, or have some fallen away?
Thank you. I need to be careful around how much detail I share around that. I did indicate that TRIM space operates under a regulatory environment. I'll share as much as I can, but obviously within some bounds. The 11 players are still in play. We have not had anyone pull out. Where we are now is we are solving for their readiness through announcing the successful applicants. We've given them a window for them to go get ready. Obviously, things such as rolling stock are long lead items, and they would require a bit of time to procure and bring on board. And through our lease code, some of the 11 players have approached us, and they've ordered some of the rolling stock through our leasing company. But even with that, it's rolling stock that still requires refurbishment and maintenance, which requires time. and they've partnered with our Transnet Engineering Division that would then help them with that refurbishment. So all 11 are still in the running, no one has pulled out. All of them are gearing up for readiness. You would have picked up in the media that some of them have been announcing that they've ordered their rolling stock. In fact, some announced arrival of 1 loco, 2 locos. So already they are starting to rally. Remember, there are 3 things that they need to solve for. Number 1 is to organize themselves for operations. Number 2 is to capacitate themselves from a human capital perspective. Number 3 is to bring on board rolling stock that they require, and all of these things would require, especially at the human capital part, there's training that needs to be undertaken, there's certification that needs to be in place. I must say, others have taken a different approach though. As TOCs, they've gotten the slots and they've said, in order for us to get going quicker, they've come back to us as Transnet and they've said, TFR, I'd like to subcontract you for a duration to run this slot for me until such time that I'm ready to then pick that up. Obviously, when they do that, they then would be the ones that would fund the capital requirements of rolling stock, because we can't take from our already existing rolling stock that is servicing industry, because they would literally be robbing Peter to pay for. We want growth and want to see additional volumes. So all on track, and there's some significant improvements in terms of that.
There obviously will be some difficulties and discrepancies when it comes to the contracts, right? Warranty terms, this and that. And I know there's some bounds that you have to approach this with. But what is Transnet doing to sort of ensure the process becomes as competitive as possible? What are you doing to make sure that these processes are not leaning towards just one side, that they accommodate both you and the TOC?
So the one thing that we have found, and it's an interesting development, is that the way that TRIM was set up, there was a clear intent to build Chinese walls between the rail infrastructure manager and Transnet Freight Rail, in as much as they are divisions within the same group. To the extent that we found that TRIM actually spends more time with other TOCs than they do with TFR, out of fears of obviously being found to be non-compliant in terms of being favorable towards TFR. And for that reason, they apply stringent processes in considering applications, including TFR applications. TFR has had some of its lots that it has applied for being declined. It's as simple as that. The rules of engagement as set out in the network statement apply across the board, whether you are within Transnet or external to Transnet. The playing fields are level. Everyone is treated in the exact same approach. And secondly, though, we also do acknowledge that Transnet has already existing commitments to industry, and through IREC, the reform process does take into account or recognize the existing commitments that Transnet has to industry. And therefore, all contracts that are in place will be executed and will be seen through by Transnet.
Thanks for that, Bonginkosi. Let's now take a look at your questions from Slido. I've got a question that says, has TFR benchmarked all the rail rates that TFR charge for the different commodities of transport against the countries who also produce those commodities? For example, South Africa competitive on logistics versus competing commodities.
100%. Yes, we've done that. We've done that. So there are two things that are a hindrance in us ensuring that these equalized rates and tariffs. Number one, some of the countries that compete with South Africa with the resources that we export, we're fortunate to have their resources deposited in close proximity to the ports. If you look at manganese, for example, the biggest producer being Australia, they literally run belts from the mine to the port, as opposed to 1,000 kilometers inland for South Africa. And therefore already that tells you that even if you want to compete, there's very little that you can do in terms of that. The second part to it is that other railways in other countries have got a system where rail tariffs are subsidized by government. And therefore it becomes difficult to compete in an environment where we as Transnet have to be able to wash our own faces from our own operations, and there's no subsidy whatsoever that we get in enabling that. It's a conversation we've been having with government for some time to say, in order to enable the economy and therefore put in place the right pricing mechanisms, there is a requirement that there must be some subsidy of sorts, but of course the fiscals at this stage cannot afford to support that. To that extent, even within South Africa itself, and I know the question is around, have we benchmarked with other countries? Even within the country itself, we've also done a benchmark with road. And funny enough, the same principle applies. Road also enjoys a subsidy by government, and rail does not. And therefore, it makes it very easy for some of the cargo to migrate into road, especially in periods where there is low demand for road. Road pricing becomes quite flexible. Today it's 1,000 rands, tomorrow it can be 500 rands, and it fluctuates, and therefore it becomes easy for customers to dabble between road and rail. Had there been level playing fields where both rail and road are subsidized, then we're talking a completely different story.
Got another question from the audience, and this one is on manganese. What is the criterion to qualify for rail on the manganese line outside the MEDS process?
Outside there?
It says MEDS process. Do you know what that is?
That would be MECA, I would assume.
MECA, perfect.
Yeah. So we are trying to streamline as much as possible the manganese process into one. And that one process is the MECA process. MECA, for the benefit of those that are not intimate in that space, is manganese export capacity allocation process. It's a process that we run on a regular basis. Maybe every 2 years we'll open up. When we create capacity, we invite applicants to apply. The requirements, to answer the question directly, would be number one, it has to be an entity that has a valid mining right. Number two, you have to be in production, and therefore you can't have a mining right and not be in production and then apply for capacity. Number three, the ore that you want to move out of that capacity that you are applying for has to come from the mining right and the mine that you are operating. We've learned to put layers to this thing because some producers or applicants were being smart in the past. They would get a mining right and they would start a mine small scale, and then they would apply for capacity, would grant the capacity, and then they would go get ore somewhere else and stop their mine. The intention is to enable mining here, and therefore the ore has to come from the mine within which you have applied. And then lastly, obviously, it's the compliance requirements, your legal compliance, your financial capabilities.
Thank you for that. We've got quite a lot of questions coming from the audience. It's so difficult to pick which one, right? But I'll try to get to them as fast as I can. What are you doing regarding the corruption in the ports and unfair allocation of capacity?
Yeah, can you skip that one? Yeah, look, I think it's something that has come up quite extensively, and it's something that we are aware of. To that extent, we've brought in law enforcement to do what they need to do. In the port of Richards Bay, for example, where there have been some significant allegations around that, we've brought in the SIU. They've done a bit of work around that. They continue to do work around that. At the end of the day, we cannot sit back as a state-owned entity and allow for behaviors and practices of that nature. We do need to ensure that our focus is on what we need to focus on, which is to move volumes. And for that reason, we are bringing in law enforcement, and they are currently doing a lot of work around that.
Yeah. Number one says, with iron ore volumes expected to decline, will Transnet allow more manganese on the iron ore line at a cheaper rate? And why is manganese rail rates more expensive than coal and iron ore?
All right. Again, another good question. In fact, there are 3 questions in that one question. I'll try and tackle all 3. Whoever asked that question doesn't like me. I must register that. So the first part around the decline of iron ore volumes, we are finding an interesting phenomenon. We were expecting that iron ore volumes will start declining. What is happening is iron ore producers, instead of that, and the reason for the decline in iron ore volumes would have been because of the decline in grade. We are slowly starting to run out of high-grade iron ore. What's happening though is the iron ore producers are investing in technology that will improve or upgrade low grade into high grade, and therefore reposition themselves in the market. We've had 2 producers that have implemented those plans in their mines, and others are following suit. The biggest producer, which the entire room knows, in Kumba, is also doing exactly the same. When that happens, that will buy them tens of years of further production, and therefore we are no longer counting or banking on iron ore volumes coming down. It seems there will be stability in iron ore volumes throughout. That said though, we run manganese volumes in that section. The reason why pricing is different, manganese is higher than iron ore and coal, is because it's a density issue. An iron ore train, and I'm going to make this as clear as possible, an iron ore train, one train of iron ore consists of 3 rakes, and combined they make 34,000 tons. A manganese train, on the other hand, carries 8,000 tons. So for the same effort, using the same line, using locals and there's a world of difference in what you are able to carry on the line. Primarily because, like as I said earlier, a section of the manganese line cannot take a higher axle load. So it's a density issue. The heavier the train, the lesser the cost per ton, and therefore the lower the tariff. So
shouldn't it be the other way?
It is the heavier the train, the lesser the cost, because you're carrying more tonnage in that one slot. So one driver is getting the same salary but moving 34,000 tons. The next driver is getting the same salary but moving 8,000 tons. Your cost remains the same. Yes. So that's the reason why we are pursuing densifying manganese trains, because the minute you are able to do that, then you'll be able to shrink the cost, and therefore the tariff will follow.
Makes sense. Thank you. And we've got another good one here. It says, thank you, Bonginkosi, for your insights. I think I kind of pulling something before they right?
Then the punch is coming.
Yes. In your risk mitigation strategy, to what extent do you incorporate policy changes? For example, an export restriction regime that would likely affect rail volumes?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So we try best as possible to have our lines multi-commodity lines, and the reason for that is so that it enables interchangeability of commodities. In the event that there is a ban in manganese exports, for example, manganese runs in the same system as iron ore, you are then able to shift into iron ore or into another commodity. The same applies on the coal side. We run coal, chrome, magnetite on the same line, and therefore you are able to move around these commodities. That said though, we also are cognizant of the fact that if the decision by government and the policy changes towards a different approach, i.e. to put an embargo on exporting commodities, there must be something that comes out of that, and whatever comes out of that would still need to be exported. And therefore, if we are not exporting manganese, for example, we are exporting sinter. If we are not exporting sinter, we are exporting final product. Whatever it is that comes out of the system, our network is able to then carry that. We might just need to change the type of wagon that we use, but the network itself still remains usable.
Yes, correct. Has the railway force majeure been lifted to Maputo that was caused by the severe weather? And I'm assuming this is on the recent flooding news in Maputo. Also, when was the FM officially declared? So has it been lifted, and when was it declared?
To the first question, it hasn't been lifted, even though operations have resumed. We are still limping and we are running slowly, and therefore we still have that limitation. We cannot lift it fully until we are back at full operation, and therefore it remains intact. The declaration of FM would have happened during the time of the floods itself. The minute we recognized that the trains were no longer moving, we then had to declare that.
Okay, I'm going to go through the last one because there's a flood of questions. Let's see. Okay, what is the plan to open Saldanha for junior iron ore miners on the iron ore line? Can a Mecca 3 or Quattro model be considered for iron ore line in Saldanha for the benefit of junior iron ore producers?
Yes, another good question. So, what has prohibited us from onboarding new players and junior miners on the ore line over the years has been that we've had long-term agreements that locked in the entire capacity for the line on the ore line. Fortunately, those expire in 2027, and that has allowed us room to then start the processes of onboarding new players. We are so eager around that to the extent that we started this process last year already. In November rather, we went out on the market. We issued out an invitation to participate for all players to apply for capacity on the ore line. We've received tons of applications for it. I think we're sitting in the hundreds. We've sifted through again using a criteria. The criteria is you have to have a valid mining right, you have to do mining, same as Mecca. That has resulted in, and I won't give you a number, a short list of applicants that we are taking to the next level. We are going to be doing due diligences and we'll start the contracting processes. So to answer the question directly, it is happening now, literally. If you are asking, it means you may not have seen it out there. It's caused a lot of waves. There's been a lot of noise around it. People are excited. We really are at the verge of turning a corner. Come 2027, and I say it proudly so, we will see the first junior miner coming into the iron ore line, exporting iron ore, and it's a big feat and achievement that we celebrate on our end.
Last but not least, and I'm not sure how far you can go into this, but certainly I think you will have an opinion. With Traction's planned 3.4 billion investment into rolling stock, how will this transform railings and for what commodities? Do you have an idea on that?
Sure. I won't get into the details of that. What I can safely say though is this dovetails very neatly with what I mentioned earlier, which is rail addressable market of 250 million, Transnet doing 180 million. That gap of 70 million tons must be captured by someone. So if private sector is bringing in rolling stock, and they are going to plug it into these commodities, then by all means. As to which commodities Traction is targeting, I won't get into that.
And that brings us to the end of this conversation. Thank you so much to all for your questions, and Bonginkosi, also thank you for your comprehensive insights on what's happening at Transnet. And we look forward to being back here to see all the improvements. Colleagues, join us again in 30 minutes as we will expand the panel on rail and port experts who are on the ground to just delve a little bit deeper into the conversation of rail and logistics. Thank you. See you again in 30 minutes.